Every gilded cage is built with walls of comfort. The only question is what you're paying for them.
All right, let's dive into one of history's most fascinating and, frankly, most misunderstood spiritual movements, Gnosticism. It's a wild story about secret knowledge, a flawed creator, and a reality that might be nothing like what it seems. To get our heads in the right space, let's start with an idea you've probably seen before. This feeling, right? The sense that the world is some kind of prison for your mind, a beautiful, elaborate deception. It's a huge theme in our culture. And it turns out it has some incredibly deep and very, very strange historical roots. So let's get right into the thick of it. At the heart of the Gnostic myth, or at least the version we've all heard, is this truly radical, world-shattering question. It just completely upends the foundation of most Western religion. It suggests that our reality, everything we see and touch, is basically the product of a cosmic mistake. And this flawed creator has a name. The Demiurge. Now, this isn't the ultimate all-knowing God. No, he's more like an ignorant, maybe even arrogant, cosmic builder who thinks he's the only God there is. He creates our physical universe, but it's just a flawed, busted copy of a much higher spiritual reality. And in doing so, he builds a cage for something truly divine. So, how did this whole mess happen? Well, the myth goes something like this. First, you've got this perfect, purely spiritual world. An entity from that world, called Sophia, which means wisdom, sort of falls. And in her passion and confusion, she accidentally gives birth to the Demiurge. Now this new being, totally unaware of the true reality above him, goes off and creates our world. And here's the kicker. He traps these divine sparks, which are actually little pieces of his mother, Sophia, inside of human bodies. So this story says there's a piece of the divine locked inside every single one of us, and the key to escape isn't faith, it's Gnosis, a secret, revealed knowledge of who you really are and where you truly came from. And get this, the Demiurge isn't working alone. He creates this whole team of helpers called the Archons. You can think of them as the cosmic prison guards. Their entire job is to keep us distracted, keep us ignorant, and stop us from discovering that secret knowledge that would set us free. They want to make sure those divine sparks stay right where they are, powering this flawed system. It's a pretty epic cosmic drama.
It's an amazing story, right? But this is where things take a really sharp turn. Because for most of history, the story I just told you is the only one anyone had. And, you see, the people who wrote it down were definitely not its fans.
Okay, so this is the crucial point. For centuries, literally the only accounts we had of anything called Gnosticism came from its biggest rivals. These early Christian leaders who were trying to build one single Orthodox church. To define who they were, they had to create an enemy, and they called that enemy Gnosticism. Let's just track how this happened for a second. In the first century, Christianity was, well, it was a mess. A beautiful mess of different ideas, different gospels, all sorts of beliefs. But over the next few hundred years, a really powerful movement worked to streamline it all. Guys like Irenaeus and Tertullian, they literally invented the categories of orthodoxy, which means right belief, and heresy, wrong belief. They decided which books were in and which were out, creating the New Testament we know today and branding everything else as dangerous lies. And this is the real bombshell. This is the modern scholarly view. And historian Karen L. King sums it up perfectly here. The idea of Gnosticism as some kind of single, unified religion, it's basically a historical illusion. It's a label. It's a box that its opponents created to dump all their rivals into, anyone who threatened their claimed absolute authority. You see, these other groups weren't some distant pagans. They were rivals. They were so similar, in fact, that they were seen as a much bigger threat, an internal threat. So the label Gnostic wasn't just a name, it was a weapon. It was a way to push anyone who disagreed out of the conversation. So for centuries, that was that. The case was closed, the so-called heretics lost, their books were destroyed, and their story was told only by the people who defeated them. But history has a funny way of holding its breath, and sometimes the desert gives up its secrets. The year is 1945, and just as the world was crawling out from one kind of darkness, a stunning discovery was made in the Egyptian desert, and it would shed a whole new light on a 1,500-year-old mystery. Everything we thought we knew was about to get turned on its head.
It happened by complete chance. An Egyptian farmer, a guy named Muhammad Ali al-Saman, stumbled on a sealed jar. He wasn't looking for history, He was looking for fertilizer. But inside that jar wasn't gold or jewels. It was something so much more valuable, a lost library from the ancient world.
And what he found, wow, it was an absolute treasure trove. These weren't just copies of books we already knew about. Nope, these were completely unknown gospels, secret teachings, and wild philosophical texts. Things like the Gospel of Thomas, which is a collection of secret sayings from Jesus, and the Apocryphon of John, which contains that crazy elaborate creation myth we talked about at the beginning.
I mean, this was a total game changer. It was like finding the black box from a lost civilization. The story no longer had to be filtered through the angry writings of their enemies. Now, finally, we could read what these ancient spiritual seekers actually believed, written in their own words.
So, of course, this was the million-dollar question, right? Did these texts confirm the story the Church Fathers told about this one single evil religion, or did they tell a totally different story? And the answer was a huge, resounding no. The Nag Hammadi library didn't contain the scriptures of some Gnostic church. It was a library containing the books of numerous, totally distinct, and often competing spiritual movements. That box, labeled Gnosticism, was just blown wide open. Just take a look at this table for a second. You can really see how different these groups were. For some, like the Scythians, the creator god was an evil tyrant. For others, like the Valentinians, he wasn't really evil, just ignorant, a mistake that needed to be corrected, not destroyed. And then you have the Thomas Christians, who didn't seem to care that much about the creation myth at all. For them, the whole point was to find the kingdom of God, which Jesus says is right inside you. I mean, these aren't small disagreements. They are fundamentally different ways of seeing the world.
And the differences weren't just in the big ideas either. Some of these texts are super dense philosophy. Others are these beautiful, poetic stories about the soul. And yes, some of them are just these grand, mythic adventures. To lump them all together and call them one thing, it's just not accurate.
And yet, despite all this complexity, there's a reason these ideas still have such a powerful pull on us today. Why does the Gnostic feeling, if not a single Gnostic religion, feel so incredibly modern?
Well, for some people, the connection is really direct. There are actually modern Gnostic churches today, like the Ecclesia Gnostica. They use the Nag Hammadi texts as the foundation for a living, breathing spiritual path. And it's all focused on that core idea, salvation through Gnosis, direct personal spiritual experience.
But for most of us, I think the influence is thematic. That deep distrust of institutions and official stories, that's a modern echo of the Gnostic view of the archons, the cosmic agents of control. That search for an authentic spiritual experience, one that's your own and not handed down to you, that's the quest for Gnosis. That feeling that reality is just not quite right, that there's something more beyond the veil. That's the Gnostic worldview you see everywhere from high philosophy to movies like The Matrix.
You know, the whole story of Gnosticism is just this powerful reminder that what we call history is often just the version that won, the one that survived. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other voices were silenced? What other libraries are still out there buried under the sand, just waiting to tell a completely different story about who we are and where we all came from?